Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, in 2007 I did what a lot of other men in my family had done, which is I joined the military. We were always an army family and I knew since I was little that I wanted to join just like my father did and his grandfather did. At this time we were at war and sending a lot of men over to Iraq to fight. I knew when I joined that there was a good chance of me being sent over there into actual war. I joined without having much of anything to my name, except for one thing, that is, I inherited a house and the best part of it was that the mortgage was fully paid off already. It used to be my uncle's house and since he had no kids of his own to pass it on to, I ended up getting it. I know these two things seem unrelated, for now at least, but they will be connected a couple of years down the line. So I got through my basic training and before I knew it I was saying goodbye to my parents and being shipped out to Iraq. I bonded with my squad and while there were good moments we never forgot that we were in an actual war. It felt a little surreal at times because about a year and a half before I was just a high school kid sitting in science class. Now though I was holding a gun and being told my deployment was for 15 months. It ended up only lasting 9 after a base I was stationed at was attacked. My shoulder and arm got really messed up from the entire thing and I was being told medically I had to return. Doctors were able to save the physical arm, but it's essentially useless. The nerve damage was extensive and I cannot hold a pencil with that hand, let alone a gun to fight. It was an honorable discharge and I was now 20 years old and a disabled veteran of war. I stayed with my parents for months trying to rehab my arm the best I could and fight off the depression of what happened. It was rough, but they helped me through it and I was ready to go and live independently in my house. Only to find that people were now living in it and the HOA was on record for being the ones that sold it. A fire was building within me that I thought went out the day I was hurt forever. I was able to get a meeting with the HOA president and though my time in the army was short, I learned a lot about how to deal with certain types of people. Me? What the hell is this? I slammed down the paperwork showing the sale of my house by the HOA. HOA? We sold an abandoned house in the neighborhood. Me? That house was mine. You did not have any permission or rights to sell it. HOA? You should have been living in it then. We have the right to sell a house that has been abandoned. And it would be wise of you to speak to me in a respectful manner. Me? You think you deserve respect? I was in a literal war and I came home to find that you had sold my house. If anybody needs to show some respect, it's you. HOA guy? Oh please, all you military think you're special and deserve treatment. Good parking, special discounts, etc. Me, maybe because most people feel grateful to live in a country where others volunteer to protect them instead of needing a mandatory draft. Me being a veteran does not matter anyway because you sold my house illegally. The HOA president actually waved me off and started laughing at me for confronting him, even going so far as to mime his arm in a way that was mocking how mine looked and moved. I literally told him that I was in the war and he had the nerve to make fun of my disability. This was me trying to play nicely, but now the gloves were off and I was gonna make sure that his life was miserable. Step 1 was to sue the HOA president for selling my home and using their own laws against them. While it's true the HOA can sell an abandoned property, they have a ton of hoops they are meant to jump through first. This is to prove the house is actually abandoned and the owner just is not away or something. If they followed procedure, they would have ended up finding out where I was really fast and that I still owned the house. This also meant that the HOA president knew I was at war but still went ahead and sold my property. The excuse that he came up with disgusted me more than anything else a person has said. The HOA president really stood in court and claimed that he sold my property because he knew I was at war and figured that I would end up dying there and never coming back. He also once again went on a rant about how I should not get any special treatment because I fought and got hurt fighting in the war. No care, no empathy, no respect. Not a single person in that courtroom could look at this man after what he had said. I was not asking for any special treatment, I just wanted payback for him selling my house illegally. I could have been off at college or something and it still would have been illegal. I'm sure if that was the case he would be calling me an entitled college boy. I was granted my winnings of $580,000 but I was not nearly done making this guy's life hell. I had a ton of emotions from everything and he was the target it was all getting taken out on. I gathered a bunch of other veterans and military personnel to tell them about the HOA president and what he thought of veterans. I wanted this HOA gone and nothing like 100 men and women in uniform protesting him. The backlash was so bad that he did not have a choice but to back down and shut down the entire HOA with him. In fact, even after he shut it down, he was getting so much hate from the military community, he had to move. I don't know if he also changed his name or just managed to hide, because when I tried finding him again when writing this story, he is nowhere to be found. I managed to wipe a guy clean off the internet because he felt like taking advantage of me and thinking he could get away with it because I was young and not around. If you think that what I did was an a-hole move or bullying, you have the right to think that. I do believe that if you or anybody you know is in the military and got treated that badly, you would want this guy to pay too. Messing with one disabled 20-year-old veteran does not mean that you just mess with him. It also means you mess with everybody else in the service, and that's a fight that nobody is gonna win. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment, because that would help me tremendously. However, please stay on for the next story because it is an absolute banger. It's titled "Racist Mother-in-Law Sets My Wedding Dress on Fire." I am entering the non-existent competition for worst mother-in-law. Sadly, the prize I think is just having the worst one, which is the opposite of a prize. Either way, I hope you guys enjoy this story, and I really hope that nobody reading this has a mother-in-law that can come close to comparing to mine. You know how sometimes when you're dating somebody, their family is nice and amazing, but as soon as you marry them, you see the horrible people they really are. Well, this is nothing like that, because from the first day I met her, I was told to my face by my future mother-in-law that she hated me. With the main reason just being that I was Chinese while her and her son were Korean. As an Asian American, I know that there's some beef between us, but this was insane. She would constantly talk down about Chinese people when I was sitting right there. It was the first time too, so I did not want to make a scene or just get up and walk out. Instead, I got to hear a lecture about how Korea is so much better in every single way, even going so far as to ask her son to dump me right in front of me and instead go and find a nice Korean girl. I'll admit that part was done to him in Korean, which she did not know I understood. I very nicely told my future husband that I did not want to have another meal like that, and he agreed it was a bad idea. I was not gonna dump somebody because of their mother being a racist, so we just kept dating. I knew that his mother was probably talking about me to him, but I did not want to know the things she was saying. It would do me no good to hear her comments, and I knew that he was a good enough guy to not be listening or buying into anything she was saying. Jumping ahead 2 years later, and we were planning for our wedding. When it came to talking about the guest list, the topic of his mother was brought up. He knew that I did not like her, but he only had one parent and really wanted her there. We had a discussion of possible outcomes, and in the end came to the conclusion that in a room that was half Chinese, she was not gonna get away with saying something horrible to me. I wanted to believe that she just wanted to be at her son's wedding, despite not liking the person that he was marrying. He also had other family there that he would ask to keep an eye on her and make sure she did not even get near me. With all that in place, I agreed to being okay with her coming to the wedding and did not think anything else of it. I had much more planning to do, and a single person was not gonna take up my thoughts. Then the day of the wedding came, and before we even managed to have the ceremony, did disaster strike. I was in a back room getting ready and had yet to put on my dress. With me was my mother, my sister, and my bridesmaid. I guess mother-in-law got wind of what was going on and came back, basically inviting herself to get ready with the rest of the girls. I did not want her there, but again was not gonna be the one to start a fight at my own wedding. I just smiled at her and finished getting my makeup done as she walked around. Nobody even noticed that she seemed to vanish for a few minutes, but then we all smelled and saw the smoke and heard mother-in-law laughing. When we went to see what happened, we saw that my wedding dress was on fire and she was standing there just holding a lighter. Talking about how now I could not marry her son. The fire spread from the dress and got some curtains, causing the entire building to be evacuated. I ran right to my husband and told him what his mother did and that she had ruined my dress. She was even thinking he would side with her, but instead he was the one that asked for charges to be pressed once the police arrived. She had gone too far and he was not about to defend her destroying my dress. She was put into handcuffs and shoved into the back of a police car. We scrambled to figure out what to do, and I ended up wearing one of the bridesmaid dresses that was my size, while she got some random clothes from her car to wear instead. The rest of the wedding was fine, but I was to move ahead to more of the mother-in-law story. So she was found guilty of destruction of property for the dress. Also, she was found guilty of arson because the building also caught fire and caused damage. Finally, the venue pressed charges because they wanted her to pay for the damage she caused. She had zero remorse for what she did and tried to say it was my fault for marrying her son. She ended up getting sentenced to 5 years in prison and was not happy about it. Now, I know this is where most stories would end, but not mine. Going to jail did not stop her from trying to keep me and my husband apart. She kept sending us letters in the mail telling us that we had to get divorced, telling her son that I was no good for him because I was Chinese. And he clearly would end up poor and childless. When none of that obviously worked, she started sending us threats in the mail from prison. Now, the way I believe prison mail works is that it is screened by guards so that people cannot write to send drugs or other crime stuff. I don't know if it was because they didn't have anybody to screen her mail or they just did not bother doing it. Anyway, she was writing these letters in Korean and there was a chance that nobody working at that jail could read it. Inside those letters were threats that she had connections to a hitman and the money to hire one. That if my husband and me did not get a divorce, she would have him come to the house and kill me. The nasty letters I could ignore, but this one scared the crap out of me. I told my husband I was really worried, so we took all the letters to the cops to file an official complaint. It turns out they take these threats very seriously, and despite already being in jail, she was now being charged for harassment and threats. While threats are not a criminal offense, she is not allowed to write certain things in her prison letters, and even though it did not get screened, it was her fault. She got another 3 years added to her sentence and a ton of new restrictions put on her. Since they could not trust her with it anymore, she was not allowed to send mail out unless she wrote it in English, which she 100% could do and just was not in order to not get censored. She was also not allowed to send any mail to me or my husband because we now had an order of protection against her. The same rules went for phone calls that if they couldn't screen what she was saying, she would not be allowed to make them. Since now there was a risk of her trying to get in contact with a hitman, I feel much safer and happier that she is in jail, but for a while I felt bad for my husband. I knew she was horrible, but it's still his mother and I assumed he would be a little sad that she was in jail, but instead I noticed his entire demeanor change. He seemed happier and sure of himself since his mom was not able to talk to him. I don't know what kind of things she would say to him about other aspects of his life, but he is way better off without them. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. It was posted by user csound1968 on r/ripestories, which is our own subreddit. I guess this is what you would call a malicious compliance story. I might have some of the facts wrong as this is a story my father told me some 20 years ago and he has since passed. Many years ago, my father was a highway bus driver for a company that served rural northern Ontario. Basically, his run consisted of picking up some passengers in various northern communities and bringing them to a bigger town, where they would either catch a train or have some bus connections to bigger centers such as Sudbury or Ottawa. At one of his rest stops where passengers would go eat at a restaurant or stretch their legs for roughly 30 minutes, there was one man that decided he wanted to finish his meal and figured that he was cool with the idea of his fellow passengers missing the train or their bus connections. My father made an announcement that the bus was leaving in 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, my father counted his tickets and saw that he was one person short. He ran back into the restaurant and announced that he was leaving shortly and that the missing person should get on now or stay behind. No one got up. So he went to the bathrooms and repeated himself, no answer. He went back to his bus and started to pull out slowly, honking his horn. Then waited another 2 minutes and did not see anyone coming, so he left. Later on that day, when arriving at the train/bus station, my dad received a message to call the head office. When he called and talked to his supervisor, I will call him Mr. C for this story, he hears his boss saying, "You forgot a passenger today and it's costing us money." My father went on to explain what happened. "I don't care," said Mr. C. "You don't leave any passengers behind. We had to pay for his taxi that cost more than his ticket. If this happens again, we will give you 100 CUNY points. CUNY points is a point system that the company has set up. Once you get so many over a certain period of time, the employee will get terminated. So as my father gets off the phone and returns to his bus, he saw a taxi show up at the station. He recognized the man walking out. It was the same guy that was eating at the restaurant and was right next to him when he made the announcement that the bus was leaving. He went to talk to the taxi driver, and it turns out the company paid the taxi $120. Fast forward a week or two later, my father had the same man in his bus again. Same story, my father made the announcement and again one passenger short. He went into the restaurant and went to that one man. "Father, you know that you're supposed to be on the bus, right?" The passenger, "I'm not done eating, you will have to wait for me." This is where the malicious compliance kicks in. My dad went back to the bus, honked the horn every 2 minutes, but stayed there close to 20 minutes before the man came in. My father just said loudly as the man gets on the bus, "You do realize that many might miss the train and or bus connections just because of you, right? Just shut up and drive." As he went to get his seat, some passengers made comments about this man being a douchebag or an a-hole. My father then proceeded to drive at the speed limit, something that he never really does, and sure enough they missed the train and some of the customers missed their bus connection. The company had to pay for the hotel rooms for the 30-something passengers that missed their ride. Again, my father was asked to call the head office, Mr. C. "What the hell happened? This is gonna cost us thousands of dollars." He went in to explain what happened. Mr. C, "Well, if this happens again, I'll have no choice but to give you some CUNY points." So my dad said, "I cannot be late or I get some points?" Mr. C, "Unless it's a road closure, no, you cannot be late." Dad, "But I cannot leave a passenger behind?" Mr. C, "No, it looks bad for the company and yes, you will have points." My dad, "So what am I supposed to do?" Mr. C, "You make sure they are on the bus on time and don't miss the connections." My dad, "Can I force him on?" Mr. C, "No, you can't." My dad, "I guess we will have a meeting next week and I will need a union rep," and hangs up. A week later or two later, same story again, same entitled male Karen refused to get on. This time my father got on the bus, informed everyone on the bus that if he leaves anyone behind, that is he is likely to get fired, and if he is late he will get fired. He then proceeded to give all the passengers a pen and papers and requested for them to write a statement of how he did everything he could to get that man get on the bus, but blatantly refused until he was done with his meal. So my father left 15 minutes late without him, but drive well over the speed limit and barely arrived at the station on time. Again, the company paid for a taxi for the entitled male Karen. At the discipline meeting, my father gave all the statements from the passengers. He had also gotten the management and staff from the restaurant to make statements as well. They decided not to give him any points and asked my dad to let them know the next time the man gets on. Flash forward to the next week. My father had the same man, so he stopped at a gas station, ran in and called his boss and informed Mr. C of the situation. When they arrived at the restaurant, he was able to see his boss sitting at a table. After the 30 minutes, my father made his usual 10 minutes till we leave announcement. He waited 10 minutes, went to the man who was still sitting at his table and obviously still not on the bus. My dad went to him and said out loud to make sure his boss hears him, "You have to get on now or people will miss the train." The man just replied, "I'll get on when I'm good and ready." Mr. C just spoke up, "No, you get on now or stay." The man, "Mr. C is a good friend of mine. If he leaves me behind, I'll just make a phone call. I will have his ass fired." Mr. C gets up and turned red in the face and yelled, "I am Mr. C, you're not my friend and you're banned from our buses." And then proceeded to tell my father to never let this man on his bus again and to leave immediately. The entitled male Karen turned pale. As my old man walked out of the restaurant, he heard Mr. C telling the entitled man not to expect the bus company to pay for his taxi and stormed out to his vehicle. And yeah, ripe stars, that was an absolutely beautiful malicious compliance story. Thank you so much for posting it on our own subreddit. I very much appreciate it. The next one is titled Neighbors Are Insane. So on today's episode of What the Hell from the Neighbors, I need to have them approve when I do things that make any sort of noise. My neighbor just rang my doorbell to tell me his wife said to stop hammering. I was dumbfounded. I just kind of stared and said, "Excuse me?" And he informed me that we would be unable to make any sort of noise for the next few months because of their baby. To which I laughed in his face and closed the door. And now his wife is screaming at my door and he is messaging me to please just do what his wife says. So anyway, some background. My spouse bought this house in 2011. Both houses are single-family detached homes. Both lots are 1.5 lots, so there is 33 feet roughly between our houses compared to the 6 feet for the rest of the street. Neighbor's husband was already in his house. I moved in 8 years ago. Shortly after, I saw the neighbor for the first time, and it was someone I have known since I was 4. Went to school all the way through high school together. We are 40. 3 years ago he met someone. She had at the time a 2-year-old girl. We would stay at his house and I would constantly find the kid wandering the streets. They would just send her outside with no supervision, no toys, no fenced yard, and expect her to entertain herself. The child was and still is nothing but a brat. 2 years ago, she moved in with her daughter. I run a daycare, so my yard is full of fun toys. However, we also have 3 other fenced off areas, one for our pool in the summer, one for our dogs, and one for our hot tub. All of them have separate fences and self-closing gates, plus my external fence is 6 feet. During 2020, when COVID hit bad, the kids were doing virtual schooling from home. She never actually did it though. She would be ringing my doorbell in the middle of the day, asking me to open my yard for her. I would explain that she cannot be here when I have daycare kids and my daughter will come out to play after supper. She went to their backyard, dragged patio furniture to my fence and climbed in. Who knows how long she was actually in there, but she decided she was done and then couldn't get out. The latch for my main gate is at the very top, so the babies cannot open it when my back is turned. She started screaming and I ran out in a panic. Then took her home, explained what happened to the mom, and mom gave me crap for not allowing her to play. I would face a $100,000 fine if she is caught on my property during daycare hours. I explained this and she still snapped and called me a witch. I left it at that. Happened a handful more times. I started sending them daycare invoices. However, it still kept happening. I finally told them I would have to call the police next time, which I did. Except this time, mom and grandpa were both sitting outside on the stairs and watched her do. Also never bothered to come help her open the gate when she started screaming. Police gave them crap and told them to stop or mom would be charged with child endangerment. I know I have proximity sensors at the top of my fence and now get a notification if anything goes over my fence. It's gotten better as she has gotten older, so last summer we set up our above ground pool. Just ordered a new pump system and a heater. Pool was half filled. I had also just done up all my planters. I casually glance at my security cameras and see her by the pool. I head out. Main gate was open as the neighborhood kids were running from yard to yard playing. She took it upon herself to go to the pool and take buckets of soil from my planters and dump it into the pool. $400 damage to my brand new $1,000 pump and heater system that was up less than 4 hours. I snapped and screamed at her to get out of my yard and not come back. She is not allowed in my yard at all anymore unless me or my spouse is out there. Now to the current time, they had a new baby last week and me hammering in my basement is disturbing them in their house 33 feet away. And they expect me to wait until the fall to finish my project. So I am currently sitting on my bench outside, enjoying a glass of water with my outdoor speakers, playing metal while I mow the lawn, which is more louder than the little bit of hammering. I will finish that tonight after dark. Edit, lots of people are saying to call the police and CPS. I do call police when I feel it's necessary, but we have a major drug gang issue and they are busy with that and overdoses. If I call because it is non-violent and they recognize the address, it is at least 24 hours or usually not at all. I have spoken with child protection agents and this does not fall under their umbrella. It is not neglect. The kid does not listen, end of story. It's not like the parents are telling her to do it. As for those concerned about her wandering the neighborhood, I'm in a smaller city. My kid has been playing by herself in the neighborhood with regular check-ins since she was 4. I have no issues with that. At 2 and 3 when she originally did it, it was ridiculous. As for saying not to let my daughter play with her, I cannot take away my daughter's entire friend group, which is exactly what would happen. We are one of 3 houses in a row with kids. House number 1 has 3 kids, house number 2, the problem house, has 2 kids, house number 3, which is me, has 1 kid. House 1 and 2 all go to the same school. They are already outside playing by the time my daughter gets home. My daughter does activities on Saturday and Sunday mornings, so the same thing. Therefore, not allowing my daughter to play with one kid also takes 4 others away. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.